All right, we're live. Wise Talk Saturday afternoon-ish stream. I'm excited to be back. It's been a while since we've done a live talk, I believe, gentlemen. So got Mr. Myers with Alan Myers and Mr. George Gammon. And so what we're going to do different today, I'm going to open up the phone lines, hopefully. And if anyone has any thoughts or questions or comments, feel free to call in and we'll try to get you on and get your questions answered. So I think we'll kick this off with let's talk about the repo cut this past week. Surprise cut. Anybody really surprised or what?
With the Fed cut, you mean?
Yes.
No, surprised. I would have been shocked if they wouldn't have cut. I mean, all the central banks is kind of planning. I think the market thought that they were going to cut Sunday night. Mm-hmm. And so then they came out with Tuesday cut. I think the big surprise is that they came out and cut by 50 basis points and the market was still down by 750 points. Yeah. And what that means, I've been saying it for the last week or so on my channel, where I see it as the Fed and the government are in this battle versus reality. Mm-hmm. And they're in a battle for consumer confidence and the confidence of the American people. And every single time you see a news story like them canceling of the Olympics, or, now I heard that the NBA just sent out a memo to the players saying, be prepared to play in front of no fans. Yeah. And I was just watching the UFC Embedded series because there's a pay-per-view tonight. I always watch the pay-per-views and I always get caught up on what I missed on the Saturday of the pay-per-view. Yeah. And even with that, they've got a gal that's from China. They're talking about the coronavirus. And it's just a big deal. So my point is that's that side that's the confidence. And if the Fed or the government loses control of confidence, what I mean by that is that the general public or the investors, the market, feels as though the Fed, no matter what they do, no matter how low they lower rates, or no matter how much quantitative easing they do, it won't matter. And it's still not as powerful as the outside shock from a black swan. Then that's when it's, in my opinion, that's when it's game over. And you get to a type of event like 2008, if not worse. Also, too, one thing I'd love to get your guys' opinion on is I was trying to go back and research, and I could not find a time, at least in U.S. history, where the U.S. Economy has suffered from a demand shock and a supply shock at the exact same time. I don't think people understand how ugly that gets. I don't know if you guys have done any research on that.
Yeah, Mr. Alan Myers, nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. That requires some extensive research, if you ask me.
When we talk about the rate cut, I do believe you're talking about the interest rate cut of 0.5, which took the rate down from 1.75 to 1.25.
The range,
yeah. Well, if you look back, you find out that the Fed has done this before. They did it when the interest rate was 7 3/4. Yeah. They did it when it was over 5, and they're using the same tool. Half a 0.5. I'm thinking, guys, how low can you go? This is not a limbo contest.
Yeah.
So you've got this interest rate cut happening. You have what's going on in the world now as a result of the coronavirus. To George's point, they're talking about will they or will they not hold the Olympics? Mm-hmm. If they do hold the Olympics, will it be without spectators?
Yeah.
Schools are closing, universities are closing, specifically in Italy. It's just, to me, as George pointed out, the demand side is, I don't want air traffic. I'm not getting on a plane to China today. I'm not getting on a plane to Asia.
How about Seattle?
I'm not going there either. For me,
the West Coast in general.
But to that, and then on the other side is, and to me, there's a potential bright side to this, and that is when you find out how many goods come out of China to the U.S. Mm-hmm. And now the supply side may be cut for various reasons. Why? Why are we getting all of these exports from China when we can make them ourselves? And people, of course, will snap back, oh, it's cheaper. Well, as I've said before, just because you pay less at the cash register doesn't mean the total cost is less. If you look at the total cost of dealing with China, which includes all the pollution they generate, we're not better off.
Yeah, but people at Walmart aren't going to see that, Alan. If you ask someone at Walmart that comes out of the store, let's say, that just spent $100, said, hey, do you want to donate an extra $20 or an extra $50 to cover the pollution costs in China? They're going to look at you like you're completely insane. And that's another thing too, at the supply chain. I did a video on that, and I didn't even realize how extensive the supply chain is in China. Did you know 94% of the Fortune 1000 companies have part, if not all, of their supply chain in China?
I do now.
I would not doubt that.
And it's extremely distinct. It's not as if we're dealing with, let's say, Western Europe. We're dealing with our arch enemy. China is not America's friend. They have a political, and I'm not talking about the people, the culture, the history, the language. I'm talking about the government. Their government is absolutely, totally opposed to what we're about.
Yeah, but they're kind of our friend in the sense that they've been buying about $3 trillion worth of our bonds, keeping interest rates artificially low, letting those consumers going out and shop at Walmart. So it's
there's other ways to deal with that, and at some point, that price is too high.
Yeah,
we have also given up, willingly given up our self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
This is not good. And yeah, you may not get somebody from a big box store saying, no, I want to pay more. I got that. But to get change really done in this country, we need maybe 10, 15% of the people. And when enough people demand the change, and the change will happen at the retail level, as you've pointed out, George, when people start figuring out, if I buy something from China, I am actually contributing to world pollution, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to go without. I'm going to try to, encourage manufacturing somewhere, because, is the excuse going to be on our children or our grandchildren's generation? Well, we just wanted to save a buck. The problem's yours now. That's not going to fly.
Well, as of right now, I think the current issue we have now is the disruption in the supply chain, which means that whatever containers are heading this way are probably the last ones we might see in a while from China. So we may not have a problem being forced to begin manufacturing our own goods, because there's nothing coming from China as of now. And I think by this summer, if not sooner, we're going to find out, what we're capable of getting back to producing for ourselves, or we're going to go without, because I'm seeing more video clips of people riding over one roll of toilet paper. So we're going to find out what we're made of pretty soon.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Mike, that I don't think a lot of Americans understand. And I wouldn't have understood it unless I would have done that video. In that a lot of the end retail stores, whether they're in the United States or anywhere in the world that depend on China as a supply chain, stocked up quite heavily because of the Chinese New Year. So they were already, had everything in everything that they needed to get through the next month or two. They already had that. So this came at a time when, if it would have been any other time, we'd already start seeing some of those items go empty in the shelves, and you're still seeing that a lot of the Costco's and the big bulk stores. But just give it about a month or so, because there's about a 30-day lag from when it leaves China to when it gets here. Plus, they were oversupplied, and so about end of March, maybe April, I think, is when you're going to start seeing a lot of those effects, and that's predicated, of course, upon China coming back online. But I mean, who knows? I did some, I didn't do them, but I went online and looked at some smog reports of those areas, those satellite pictures where you can see the smog levels in certain Chinese towns, and they're nowhere near where they were this time last year. So it would suggest that although we're hearing that all those businesses and manufacturers are coming back online, that might not be the case.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. Now, in regards to the Fed cutting more rates, and so here's an article here that just popped up. I thought I would share it, and it talks about where we at. Let me find this. It says, where'd it go? Add the screen. Here we go. So it says the market now sees the Fed cutting by 75 basis points in March, and so if we're at 1.25-ish, they're saying basically a half of a single point or lower. Now, usually isn't cutting rates an incentive for people to go out and borrow and to spur business on? So do you see these cuts helping in the short term, or is it already too late? Because now we need a little bit more than monetary policy to kind of keep this, charade going, or what? What do you guys think?
Monetary policy is there. Let's just say that it did work for a moment, and I would dispute that. But let's just say that it does work according to their models and whatever the Keynesians believe. That's there to support a demand shock, meaning you need more demand. That cannot combat a supply shock. You got to think of like Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
And how would the Fed have lowered, if they would have lowered interest rates by 100 basis points, how would that have affected Hurricane Katrina? Or if they would have done quantitative easing? There is nothing that would have helped that. Even if they would have sent them checks in the mail for $1,000 to a certain degree, that wouldn't have helped because there's nothing to buy. So this thought that the Fed can somehow help a supply shock is just, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I did a video yesterday about my beliefs on this upcoming week. There will be some type of fiscal stimulus because outside of the 8.3 that's going to be thrown at a health situation. Not sure how that 8.3 is really going to bring about some type of productive uses other than that money being filtered to somebody's pockets or whatever. And so, if there is a fiscal stimulus coming, what will it look like? Will it be infrastructure based? Will it be based upon this health situation, or will it be something to spur job growth or whatever it is, even though we got 3.5 unemployment, all that stuff like that? The numbers still look the same outside of the fact that the narrative of a healthy, booming economy is fading with all the need for all the health scare being the primary reason why it looks like they're going to need to inject something. What will it look like, you guys' opinion?
Well, we talked about this right before we went live, and I'm sorry I couldn't find the article. There was a bill passed in the House in December of 2019. It just recently cleared the Senate. It had unanimous support in both the House and the Senate. No dissents. Last I heard, it was sitting on Trump's desk. This bill is to George's point. Let's increase some demand. This is to not only stop buying, I think it's telecom equipment from China. It is to supply money to the smaller areas of the country so they can rip out their China-made telecom equipment and replace it. Because, again, I wish I had the article because it stated it so well.
You remember the name of the bill or no?
No, that's what I was trying to look up when we called in. But it is fully bipartisan. In the middle of the impeachment, they all agreed on this. And the idea is that this kind of telecom equipment coming from China and other places is considered a potential national security threat. So there we're going to put a certain number of billions of dollars on the table for the small rural communities to rip and replace. That would, of course, increase demand. How they're going to get the supply, that's another story. But as George has pointed out, this is a very interesting time because not only do we have a potential problem for demand because people aren't going out. And if you're not on the trains, if you're not on buses, if you're not on planes, then the people that are working them may not have a job or not have as much of a job. And then you've got the problem with supply. If so much of our supply is coming from overseas and you can't get it, and frankly, I would not want to be the one to unload a big cargo ship from China.
Yeah, but you also have to remember too that even, let's just say that we did supply that, or whatever we do supply in the United States, who's to say that's not going to get cut off? I think Americans are looking at this thinking as though it's a problem that's just in the rest of the world as far as the virus. But what if the U.S. gets taken out like China, or look at Italy, or look at Iran? Look at any of these. It's an exponential growth to this thing. So even if we did make a lot of the components here in the United States, or there in the United States, I think you still could see those supply shocks. They might not be as bad. They might not last as long. But I think, especially with the economy being in such a precarious place prior to this, I think that even a small pin would have pricked an enormous bubble. And you even go back to 2008 and you look at the crisis back then, but we never had a supply issue. You never ran into, although you're losing your house in foreclosure and you're losing your job, the unemployment rate was going up, all these things happening, you could still go down to Costco and buy food.
Yeah.
Or
if you had the money, yeah.
You had the money, right?
You got the money.
Yeah, but now, I mean, not only are you not going to have money, but you're not going to have anything to buy either. It's a very unique potential situation. And the one thing I'm confident in is that the market is not discounting this at all. One thing that I I thought of, or the best analogy I can use, is I remember before I even got into the markets or macro, this would have been back in 2010, 2011. I remember I was in DC and I was watching the stock market a little bit. And I remember watching the stock RIM, BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And back then, literally everyone I knew was using an iPhone. Everybody. And I used to travel all across the United States. Everyone was using an iPhone, except for two groups of people: politicians and guys and gals on Wall Street. They were the only ones with BlackBerries. And I would sit there and the share price, call it $80 a share. I would look at that and say, how can BlackBerry be $80 a share? There's nobody using that thing. That thing is dead in the water. And sure enough, it was because all the people that are right there in New York on the stock exchange, they look at their own BlackBerry, look at everyone else around them. They have a BlackBerry. And they say, well, no, this stock, it's a deal. It's a smoke and bargain because it's not right in front of them. My point is, I think it's the exact same thing here, and that the market is driven by all these people in Connecticut, in New York City, in Manhattan. And because this coronavirus isn't right there in front of them, they're not discounting it enough. But if you have a type of situation like you have in South Korea, in Italy, in China, any of these places, if that breaks out right in front of their face, just like the BlackBerries, it's just gonna, I mean, the market I know has gone down tremendously, maybe call it 10% in the last couple of weeks. It's actually up, if you take the whole of last week, by a couple percentage points. But I think you're looking at another 20, 30, 40% down once if it hits New York and these guys see it right in front of their face and it becomes real for them.
Oh, well, just within the last hour, the state of New York has declared a national emergency within the state because there's 76 cases and 14 in New York City and 54 in Rochester. So New York is about to.
Yeah, and if it's 76 now, I can guarantee in 2 weeks, it'll be 7,000. Or if not more. I mean, this is a hockey stick. Most people, they just don't get it. They think, oh, it's 76. And well, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, what are my chances of going out there? Another thing I'd like to point out is that the cases are only being tracked by the amount of testing they're doing. So if you're not testing, now the good news is that means that the death rate is probably a lot lower. But the rate at which this thing is spreading is probably far higher than they're measuring it. One example would be Italy. We just had the first case here in Colombia. A gal in Bogota tested positive, and an Italian gal, right? Well, okay, if there's only in Italy, we're looking at that saying, okay, well, these numbers are getting really bad, but the numbers are like 7,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know it's not an impossibility, but if there were only 7,000 people in all of Italy right now that had the coronavirus, what are the chances one of them gets on a plane and comes to Bogota, Colombia, and then goes into the hospital and has symptoms enough to say to the people in Bogota to say, let's test this girl for the coronavirus? I mean, I think the probability of that is extremely low. Yeah. So I think the likelihood of Italy having 7,000 cases is nil, probably more like 70,000, if not more. And then that comes to the forefront when you start getting the serious complication rate, because the serious complication rate with the virus is much, much higher than the flu. That's what takes up all the hospital beds. And that's when you really run into problems, when you get that exponential growth.
Well, New York, I saw in the news today, quarantined over 2,300 people.
Oh, wow.
Really?
New York City. The other thing is, when they talk about cases, we're on the far end of these numbers. We're not at the origin or the generation. So sometimes what we're told, I believe, are somewhat inaccurate or misleading. For example, it's 2,700. Yeah. There are people who've been tested, and there's people who have the disease, God forbid. Yeah. Well, they put all of those numbers together as cases, so, which means the numbers can be potentially misleading. Quarantine is another thing. What I would really like to see regarding this are the numbers we're talking about, and what happened with the prior big flus that we've had before. Yeah, and what's interesting is that this one, was it COVID-19? It's actually got a special little name, and it's always called the coronavirus. Well, what I've learned, I believe this is correct, is that all these viruses that are related to colds and flus are part of the corona group. But for some reason, this one got the tag, and I just wonder about it.
Yeah, I wonder about it, but I take it seriously though, because
there's no question about it. Yeah. Some people can die from this. They have died from this. The doctor in China who first reported it out to his friends, and then they shipped that information out to their people in their internet, and then that doctor got called in by the police and was taken to task for dispersing such bad information, and then he died 3 weeks later. No, this is a serious disease. It's to be taken seriously. And part of me wonders, because I know here in Southern California, when did this first start? Was this in January?
Well, it started in November.
November.
Well, I mean, when it really hit the news, I think it started. Yeah, it
right
started
it
started in December in Wuhan, and then it made the news in January. Well, in let's say late January, early February, news was reporting how some of the Asian businesses were reporting less business, restaurants, markets, etc. And I haven't heard any reports lately, and I'm wondering whether it's local or national, how this is impacting all of these people's businesses.
Oh, the Chinese economy?
Well, no. I'm talking about local U.S., Asian restaurants, Asian markets, that kind of thing.
It's way beyond that. They just canceled South by Southwest.
No, I know that. No, this is just a slight aside. Is that, to what level is this impacting all of our business? Yeah, they just canceled South by Southwest. It's going to it's going to be very interesting to track.
Yeah, I mean, Walmart is canceling all their employee domestic flights. I read Wells Fargo is telling, I can't believe the story, but they said all of their employees to try to work from home. I don't know how that would work with 275,000 employees.
Well, how do you make a deposit at the bank?
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Quickly, speaking of Wells Fargo, I went to Wells Fargo this morning, and had they shifted everybody to working at home and just used the ATMs, well, both ATMs outside the branch didn't work.
Interesting. Now watch this. So on site, so I have people calling all week talking about over the last 2 weeks, especially people saying that all the restaurants, especially the Asian cuisine restaurants in every major city is empty. And so those are businesses that are no longer doing business. And so I assume anything in that same vicinity might be shutting down as well because of the concern of being close to an Asian cuisine restaurant. So just out of pure fear, like the fear is picking up now with very little any proof or whatsoever of there being a situation in your area, but just out of precaution, people are saying, I'm not going to do it. I'm not eating out. I'm not going to go here. And so, that was the business closing.
Yeah. From an economic standpoint, that's what's most important. Hopefully, everyone's that's suffering from this virus is obviously in everyone's prayers, but you set that aside for a moment. And what really matters, regardless of what the death rate is or the serious complication rate, it's all about fear, and it's about what this does to psychology. And if you've gotten an economy that has zero savings, basically, I mean, what is it? 75% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank, or 50%, something like that. When you look at these types of stats, everyone's maxed out. The government's maxed out. The corporate bond market's maxed out. The consumer's maxed out. We've got 8-year car loan, 10-year car loans, subprime auto debt. We've zero down mortgages. Everyone is levered to the hilt. And so it doesn't really matter from an economic standpoint, really how bad the virus is from a health standpoint, as long as it affects consumer behavior and psychology. And that, I think, is completely obvious that it's having a huge effect on that. Even down here in Colombia, I posted something on Twitter last night where I went to my gym. In fact, Mike, I went to the Charlie.
Yeah, I saw the picture.
Did you see that?
I saw your picture.
They never had that before. And what I'm talking about is Mike knows this, but when you enter my gym, it's at like the 15th floor of a hotel here, and you have like a fingerprint thing. And you put your finger, and then it lets you right in. I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about. Well, as of last night, they've got this hand sanitizer right by the fingerprint thing. That was never there before. Never. Yeah. And just yesterday, it came out in the news. We had our first case here in Columbia. So my point is that's what it does to people's mentality. And that's all that matters from an economic standpoint when you have the everything bubble and you have your entire economy that's built on asset prices, debt, and confidence.
Yeah. So we're going to have a collision course of political chaos, credit. It's going to be a lot of credit issues and debt. So all those things, I believe, are going to come to a head within this spring season, to where there's going to be an increase in reserves and injections into all types of things. And so I actually found something I think you guys might find interesting.
And look at the corporate bond market. Have you guys been watching the interest rates in the corporate bond market? As the 10-year gets closer to 50 basis points, it might even be there already. The corporate bond market, the interest rates are spiking, going through the roof, especially in the junk market.
Yeah.
How does that play out with the stock market? Because now, since we've had all these buybacks, almost 100% of the gains in the stock market since 2010 have been a result of corporate buybacks. And that's a result of pension funds being willing to go further and further out the risk curve in search of yield because they can't get it with treasuries. Yeah. So now you have this, even domestically, everything is so systemically interconnected to this amount of debt, money printing, and it's I'm preaching to the choir here, you guys.
Yeah, so it's going to be a mess. So therefore, I can see where all that injection and stimulus is going to have to go to. It's going to go to bail out a lot of bad, fraudulent businesses that are no longer able to sustain themselves, which are going to be a good portion of, all the corporations that are happening to that is used to measure the valuations of the Dow itself, as well as all the other indexes around the world. So yeah,
I talked to Steve Keen last week. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Professor Steve Keen. He's He's just a brilliant guy. But ironically, he from a political standpoint, I think he would strongly disagree with the three of us. But
Really?
that's why it's so fun to talk to these guys that are brilliant, just get a different view of everything. And really, I think that's why it's so important to keep an open mind to everyone's views. But anyway, Steve is just a brilliant guy, and he thinks that what the net result of this most likely will be, if the government is doing something that he considers effective, would be what he calls a debt jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
And then also MMT, where they're just giving checks to cover the payments of people's rent or whatever, because they can't go outside, they can't work, they can't do any of these things, and to prop up these businesses that have taken on all this debt, the government just goes in and says, we'll take it and we'll put it onto our balance sheet.
All right, hold on one second. We do have a call. Let's see if we can get a call answered. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Florida.
From Florida. What's your name and what's on your mind this afternoon?
My name is Melly, and my question is the devaluation of the dollar.
The devaluation of the dollar. Go ahead.
How would that be affecting us in the next few months?
The devaluation of the dollar. So as far as, you mean inflation picking up to where you're not purchasing as much goods and services, or what exactly do you mean by devaluation? Because it's already working on
95 handle.
Yeah,
yeah, I understand that. Meaning, like, if I have like savings in the bank, and maybe 2 or 3 months from now, how would that affect my savings in me wanting to buy anything? I know that products can skyrocket, and it will be very difficult to buy goods, maybe next year or so. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to know right now, as the devaluation of the dollar continues, how much longer would that affect the people that have savings?
Good point. So we will answer that off air. Appreciate your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody want to touch on that first?
Sure. Alan, do you want to go? You want to hit that first, and I'll take it.
What I do want to address that, but before I forget, I wanted to make a comment on what we were last talking about, if you don't mind.
Yep, go ahead.
And that is, and kind of to this woman's point, and thank you for the call. You've got people, a large percentage of people, no savings. You can get various lengths of very long-term debt for cars. As George said, you've got corporate debt at an all-time high. You got national debt at an all-time high. Stock prices are almost the highest they've ever been. Pension plans are so underfunded, public and private, that they have left their safety of AAA rated investments and are going into stocks and bonds because they're trying to get a yield to keep up with their promises that they can't keep. This is all going on, and then I hear how wonderful the economy is. Yeah. And I'm trying to understand, okay, when the food is really great at a restaurant, mm-hmm. why is everybody getting sick outside? Yeah. Okay, why is nobody going in?
Yeah.
Okay, every one of these that George touched on, to me, are indicators that the economy is not really good. Oh, there's the dead clock. I love the dead clock.
Go ahead.
They're not. The economy is based so much on debt, mm-hmm. of various forms from various sources. When somebody says, okay, well, we're just going to have, and I know what a debt jubilee is, that's when the debt is just said to go away. And that actually happened in ancient times, except for one thing. Which lender is going to say you don't have to pay me?
Well, they take it onto the Fed's balance sheet.
Oh, that's where I want it. Yeah. It already has 23 plus trillion in unpayable national debt. It has unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare at over 200 trillion.
I'm sorry, Alan. I meant the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve.
Okay. Oh, the Fed.
So they're going to add it. They're going to already.
Oh, the Fed's going to take it. Oh, that's lovely. That's just going to really give people the confidence that they're looking for in our economy, because all the Fed's going to do is create reserves, and that's fingertips on a keyboard. As far as devaluation of the dollar, perhaps the woman is talking about the results of inflation. Well, that's kind of a guess, but as we all know, when inflation takes over, the purchasing power of your dollar is less and less. There's a story from the Weimar Republic during the hyperinflation, and some guys went out one night for some beers. And this is the story. They went into the bar. They paid for all their beers that they were going to drink that night as soon as they went in, because they knew if they waited an hour or two, the price of the beer would go up.
Yeah.
So if that's the environment you have, the purchasing power of your dollar is going to decrease, which means if there's stuff out there you can buy, you're going to get less of it. But still, it's still good to have something in savings. And I also think, and this is why I'm such a big fan of physical money and not just electronic money like cryptos, is you're going to want to have some physical money in your possession. Because what happens, God forbid, and they've seen it in Greece and they've seen it in Cyprus and other places, what happens when they shut the banks down? You have no access to your electronic money, and most people's money is electronic. You can't get it, you can't transfer it, you can't access it. And when they finally open up, they tell you how much, like in Venezuela, they'll tell you how much you can take out every day in physical money. Well, that just makes us more and more dependent. To me, what the lady was talking about is, how can I minimize my dependency on a system that may break? Part of it is buy things that you really need. Don't waste it. Definitely keep some physical. Don't tell anybody where it is. And let's hope this plays out better than what it's looking like.
Good point.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, I think that gal's got a fantastic question. And I'd also thank her for calling in. When it gets a little confusing when you talk about the dollar collapse, in the sense that there's two ways that the dollar can quote unquote collapse, and that's in relationship to other currencies, and then also with domestic inflation. So going back to I believe it was 84 when they did when they devalued the dollar against the yen and the German mark, the Plaza Accord, excuse me, that was a devaluation of 50% in the matter of a year or two. But local domestic inflation was only up by 5, maybe 6% per year. So you had a complete collapse, quote unquote, of the dollar against those currencies, but you didn't necessarily see a ton of inflation domestically. So I think so I want to point out that, number one, I don't see in the next 3 months, 4 months, the dollar collapsing against other currencies. I see it maybe going down to 90 on the DXY, maybe 91. I think that would technically be a collapse, but I don't know that it goes any further than that. But that's not to say that we can't get a lot of local inflation due to the supply shocks that we were talking about at the beginning of the live stream. Regardless of the result of the inflation, the bottom line is prices can double, they can triple, they can quadruple in a week and 2 weeks time because of the scarcity of the supplies themselves because of all these supply chains. So my advice to this gal would right along the lines of what Alan was saying, and that if I was someone who, let's say, had $5,000 in savings right now in my bank account, and I was worried about this, I'd do a couple things. I'd probably go out and buy $1,000 worth of silver coins or gold coins, whatever you could get your hands on that is real money. And then I would probably take another $1,000 and I'd go out and buy as many of the staple goods that I use on a consistent basis. And I would just stock up the shelves with those things. So if prices went up and tripled or whatever for the next 6 months, that I'm not held hostage by having to pay those prices. And then with the other 3,000 or maybe 2,500, I would still leave that in cash just to have there. And hopefully, if we do see those prices increase that dramatically, the price of the gold and the silver that you have will go up as much, if not more, that will hedge your bets against that cash that you're holding there as kind of dry powder. If it was me personally, that's how I'd attack the problem.
All right, so and I'm gonna call her here. I'm gonna get to this question. So my thoughts are, I've been preaching this for a long time now. There's only three things you can really do with this item here. You can spend, speculate, or save it. And so when I mean save it, for me personally, I like to basically it was always sold to the people as being redeemable. So I look at this as a redeemable contract between the government and myself. So whenever I get a chance, I redeem a few of them by getting some physical. And then speculating is what you do with them out in the open market. You buy stocks, bonds, whatever you choose to do with the hopes of them things growing and returning something back to you. And then on the other side, you need to spend some of them on your daily living. So how much are you willing to keep in this form will determine the amount of risk you're willing to accept. So the more in that form, in digital form or paper form, the more you find yourself falling into very risky categories, I think. So, but we got a caller here. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Mike, this is Dan from Vancouver, Washington. I'm the average Joe HVAC refrigeration guy.
All right, man. How you doing?
Hey, Dan, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. So tell George that Portland sucks now, and he's lucky he moved.
Yeah,
He hear you.
yeah, I know it's getting bad. Sorry, buddy. Yeah,
unfortunately, I can't hear George, but I just wanted to ask, I think George might have just answered one of my questions a little bit about kind of, are you in your own personal portfolio holding more cash right now? I sold all my portfolio on that Monday when the stock market crashed, when the miners were actually exploding. I just hopped out because I felt like things were just really volatile, and I just liquidated everything. I didn't have a lot, but I sold everything, and I just moved into cash, and then I just, I buy physical metal, probably too much. But anyways, so I'm curious a little bit about, are you holding a lot more cash than you normally would right now? If you are, why would you ever put it in a T-bill, even if it was short term? So are you just going to let it sit in the bank and obviously keep some at home? And my other question is anyone thinking about martial law in the United States and what that would look like? Because I'm not going to let the military come to my house and take my kids or something if they're sick. Maybe that's a little too far. Maybe I'm going a little crazy there. But Mike, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that. I don't know if you're a firearms owner or anything like that, if you're going to bury your guns in your backyard, or if you're going to shoot people that try to come into your house. I'm probably getting into a Hollywood movie there, but yeah, just food for thought. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate the call.
Thank you. Well, I like to interject because George talked about gold and silver, and my little comment is, if you're going to have precious metals, being gold and silver, you need two other precious metals to protect them.
Yeah,
lead and steel, because lead and steel protects gold and silver.
Yeah.
If you want to get an idea of the potential for martial law, go take a look at what police look like. And I'm not anti-police, but go take a look at what they look like and what kind of gear they're wearing. If you look back, again, god-awful event, if you look back at that Boston Marathon bombing, and you take a look at the people, the men and women who responded, one person commented, "That's the same gear I wore in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's just a different color."
Yeah.
Right.
Our police overall are highly militarized.
Right.
You have states, I think Virginia is one of them. They want to control whatever firearm you have. There's laws that I've seen where, not that your firearm is illegal per se, but if it could hold a clip that can hold more than 10 rounds, just because it could hold the clip, it's now illegal.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. Yeah, I'm seeing your thing right now. That's mild, I think.
Yeah. Militarization. They got on full-fledged fatigues like they combating terrorist army combatants in the streets of Boston right there.
Yeah, I remember hearing a few stories where there's a couple counties in like Connecticut that wanted to buy like tanks and all these things. It's just like, wow. I mean, you think back to the 80s or the 70s, or here where I am in another country, and the cops here in Colombia, in Medellin, and this is a town of 4 million people. They're just, first of all, they're just kids. And they ride around on a motorcycle. It's not one of these fancy Harleys. It's just a little like dirt bike, and there's two of them. They can't even afford one per person, so it's one guy on the back and one guy on the front. And it's just look at this picture. I don't know if Alan can see this.
Yeah, I can see the photo. Where was that photo taken?
If they would have showed up like this back in the 70s when we were growing up, or the 80s or anything. I mean, what?
This is on the streets of Boston. After they were going to a house to find somebody who was barricaded in the house. So that's about 30 people fully militarized outside of a house. And everybody on that street had to stay in their house, apparently.
Yeah, I want to point out, but this isn't just when they're going to try to find someone that lit off a bomb or something like this. This is what they do if they suspect you of like not filing your taxes or something. Seriously, have you seen like they'll have some sort of it's escaping me now, but some sort of operation where a guy is accused of like doing something very mild, like collecting his own rainwater or something like that, or drinking whole milk, and they show up at his door looking like that, and it's like, what? And
all right, we got another call. Hello, caller. What's the name? Where you calling from?
Barlight Broker, calling from the internet.
All right, my friend. What's in your mind?
Hey, you guys are looking handsome today. I wanted to let you know that if you each had a nice gold chain hanging around your neck, you'd be looking a little bit better.
All right.
Good point. What's on your mind?
Nothing much. Just wanted to call on the show and say hi. Tell you guys we never forgot about the victims of 9/11 or the Boston bombing or any of that bullshit. We know it was all false flag. And that's it. That's all I really wanted to say.
I appreciate the call, my friend. Thanks for the support.
Thank you.
Be safe and well.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, gentlemen. Oh man, militarization. So, all right, let's talk about another question about the cash. Is that they're going to quarantine cash? So the Federal Reserve looks like anything coming in from Asia will be quarantined in 14 days. They're going to spray it down and all that stuff like that. Does this play into the removal of cash, which is a part of the game plan anyway? In your opinion?
I forget which country, but someplace. Again, I just saw it in passing during the week. They were talking about how long this virus can live on a note or on a surface, and that they are encouraging people to do their transactions electronically. To me, the overall thing is, well, okay, this virus apparently can live on all kinds of surfaces for a very long time. If you're really worried about the cash that you have, wipe it down. But that's great.
How could you tell if cash had been to China or Asia?
Yeah, good. Hey.
If it's not dollars, but if you got dollars in your pocket, you're not going to know if that's where that's been. I mean, what are you talking about?
Hey,
in a way, this is part of the fear.
Exactly.
And to your point, if you can't tell whether it's been there or not, or whether it's been held by someone that has been there.
Yeah.
Even if you could say, oh, I know this dollar bill has never, ever been on an airplane. Okay, fine.
We still
was the last person to hold it on an airplane.
Yeah, and not only that, I really want to make sure that we're in the mindset of not just saying that this is a China problem, but how do you know that dollar bill wasn't in Seattle lately?
Or Italy.
or Italy or Iran or any of these places. But this is something, we've got this problem in the United States. It's here. It's going to get a lot worse. Hopefully they'll somehow contain it and get the R naught value. That's the key, because the R naught value is the rate that it spreads from one person to another. So right now, the scientists have been saying that the R naught value of the whatever you want to call it is over 4. So that means for every one person that gets it, they spread it to another 4 people. That's how you get an exponential growth curve. If you compare that to the flu is 1.28, just slightly above 1. The magic number is 1, or hopefully a little less. If you can get the R naught value down below 1, then the virus itself self-extinguishes. It'll just run its course and it won't spread. And obviously the only way to do that when it has a natural R naught value of 4 is just to contain it and try to just let it run its course.
How is this R naught value being calculated?
It's a scientific formula that some scientists out there have put together. Some
virologists, and
okay.
people that are doctors. They've now the one that I'm quoting was a report that came out, and this is from a doctor in China, mind you. So if anything, they're going to downplay it. But this was back in February. There were a couple that came out. This was another one. This is the most, although it hadn't been peer reviewed, it was the one that most people were referencing, and most other doctors that I saw and virologists on Twitter, that's the one that they were referencing.
Yeah, I believe that the cash issue that's going to be presented is a way of putting fear into our hearts, but it's a way of sowing a seed in preparation for what I call the $E that's coming pretty soon.
I completely agree with that.
It'll be a response to the Federal Reserve or the Treasury going to get back in the mix and start issuing something through the Treasury in the form of an $E, which is going to be another way of stimulating the economy directly, because it's not something physical. It's going to be electrically sent to you via app from the Treasury Watch. So, but we have a call here. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, yes, my name is Aaron. I'm calling from Delaware on the East Coast.
What's your name, my friend?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Mike and George, and all of you for everything that you do, keeping us informed, and everything is really important in these times that we're living in. I had a real question about negative interest rates and what you guys thought about. What's the best way before that? Let's say assume at some point they're going to get rid of cash, right? But before they do that, can you get around using a bank by like paying all your bills with money orders and, just using cash?
Good point there. So anybody got some thoughts on that?
So is the question that if you could just basically make yourself just do everything in cash if there were negative interest rates in the checking deposits? Is that the question?
Hello?
Yeah.
So okay. Did you hear George's question to you? All right, so we talk about what's the negative interest rates obviously is around the corner. Let's talk about some of the consequences for savers and how is there any way to take advantage of negative rates as far as your ordinary consumer? Can they take advantage of negative interest rates?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it gets very complex in the sense that even if the banks were paying you to take out a mortgage, let's say, you're still going to pay the fiddler. And what I mean by that is they're going to calculate how much money they would have made at, let's say, 50 basis points. And magically, that's the fees, the paperwork fees, the doc fees that you're going to end up paying. They're going to just increase the fees at the ATM. They're going to somehow recoup that cost. That's first and foremost. Now, how you can protect yourself against negative interest rates, and if they go cashless, that's a great question. I mean, again, it goes back to precious metals. It goes back to Bitcoin, if you're a believer in cryptocurrencies. But it's about somehow removing yourself from the monetary system that they create. And trust me, it's going to be a challenge. But that's for right now, that's the best advice that I can give you. And just to try to educate yourself more on what the potential outcomes may be, so then you can properly weigh the probabilities of each one coming to fruition and then hopefully plan accordingly.
Here's the problem. I think here's the biggest problem to try to get around is no matter what, you're going to be compensated in some direct deposit into your accounts from whatever transactions you do. And that's going to be their way of making you still stay in the banking sector. And so how do you get around that when there's no cash? If there is cash, there's going to be minimum cash. Because I remember I read an IMF paper and they're saying they're going to tax cash withdrawal. So anyway, they're going to find a way to tax the transaction of physical paper, which will disincentivize you to want to use it. So you'll be easier to accept their stable coin or e-dollar, whatever they're going to try to usher us into. And then on top of that, your employer or any transaction you do, they're going to pay you in that, and it has to be directly deposited into the banking system. So escaping the system will be very, very hard. So, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Allen.
Negative interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
This just screams something is wrong. When money has no time value to save, because that's what negative interest rates are saying. This tells me there's something really, really wrong with the monetary system of the country that's going. Second, cashless. I've talked about this before. If you are in a monetary system that has no physical counterpart, you are totally dependent on the system, which means you're totally dependent on computers, computer access, internet, and electricity. One of those fails, you're out. If all your monetary wealth, I'm not talking, of course, houses and cars and horses, but if all your monetary wealth is nothing but a digit in some banking computer's computer, you're totally dependent on the system.
Well, it's 97% is already.
The fact that we have most of our monetary wealth in a bank, as an electronic digit, I totally get it. But we have physical options. When those physical options go, we are totally dependent on the system. Yeah. And somebody doesn't like you somewhere, they push a button, your account goes away.
That's right.
I would put it this way, and it's like at some point, we as individuals need to think about not only what is best for us, but what is best for our community or our country. And we got to push back. If some international organization says we're going to mandate that you, the United States of America, only have electronic money, my phrase is bite me. No.
Yeah.
We're pushing back. And so we have to really deal with the problem as opposed to the symptoms.
Yeah.
We are constantly dealing with the symptoms. And I would use this analogy. Whether you like him or not, Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States, defeated the recharter of the second U.S. bank run by Nicholas Biddle. He referred to the second U.S. bank as a hydra-headed monster eating the flesh of the common man. I think the hydra... Pardon?
The precursor to the Fed. I want to make sure everyone knows that was the precursor to the Fed. That was the national bank at the time.
Yeah, the central bank. Thank you. And what I like about the Hydra analogy, its mythology, has multiple necks, multiple heads. The mythology says if you cut off one head, two will grow back. Now, any Hydra head is going to kill you if it gets you. So it's a serious problem. And we're talking about serious problems. But if you're going to take out the whole problem, the Hydra, you got to go after what it only has one of, its heart. And the heart of the Hydra we're dealing with is the control, the ownership, and the benefit that comes from the current monetary system. That has to be returned to the people.
Yeah.
So until we really sit down and address the source of these problems, we're going to just be dealing with Hydra heads. And ultimately, we're going to fail.
Yeah. All right. Let's get this last call. I'm sorry, Jarvis. Get this last call, and then we'll get ready to dial back. We're on our hour point. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Anonymous, and I'd rather stay anonymous.
Sounds good. What's on your mind, my friend?
Can we get a true opinion of what you guys think on blockchain and Bitcoin and where it's going in the next 5 years? Because it seems like you guys don't have the understanding like you guy in the white shirt. I forgot his name.
Mr. George.
He had $5,000, and he didn't invest not even $1 into blockchain.
No.
Right. Okay, so we'll touch on it.
I really want to know what's his opinion on it.
Okay, sounds good. We'll touch on it. Thanks, my friend, for the call.
Too bad Silver Ben's not here.
Yeah, Ben got Ben excited.
I'd be happy to explain myself to the caller, because I get this quite a bit, and you've got to understand that just because if I had $5,000, I wouldn't take a portion of that and put it into Bitcoin. That doesn't mean that I don't love Bitcoin. That just means that with $5,000, if someone's worried about inflation, I don't think they should be speculating with that money, because no matter how, and that's going into silver miners, any type of speculation, and I would consider a speculation to be something that I'm only betting on it because I think the value or the price is going to go up or down. An investment has to pay me to own it. It has to pay me, whether that's a dividend paying stock, whether it's a rental property. Gold is an insurance policy. So I'm not telling that lady to buy gold, take $1,000 and buy gold or silver, because I like gold and silver so much better than Bitcoin. And anyone who buys Bitcoin is just foolish. No, I'm telling her that with that $1,000, I think she should first and foremost have insurance. Mm-hmm. And so I don't see Bitcoin as insurance. That doesn't mean that I don't like it. You've really got to compartmentalize. And when I say that, there's a lot of nuance. And unfortunately, with my videos and the things that I do, I don't have the time to get into the nuance. And I'm so much more of a conceptual guy, and I don't worry about the details too much, to a fault. And I admit that. And it's just like housing market. A lot of people can say, well, George, how on earth can you be bullish, or not really bullish, but how can you suggest buying maybe a rental property in Kansas City? Then you also say in the very next sentence that the United States is in a huge housing bubble. Well, because you got to look at the nuance in that. Yes, the entire United States, if you look at it as a whole, totally in a housing bubble. That is for sure. But it doesn't mean that there's little teeny weeny pockets here and there that I might consider buying right now. So I just want to make sure that's clear to the viewer, because he's got a very valid point. But again, my point is, if you got $5,000, then that's it, and you're worried about inflation, I don't think that you should be speculating with that money.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, well, gentlemen, we are at the hour point. It has been great hanging out as always. And so as always, we can take more questions and go on forever, but I'm sure everyone has some things to take care of today. I know I got to take care of some things myself. But Mr. Alan Myers, can you point people back to your direction for those that might just be coming across this live stream for the very first time and they don't know who Alan Myers is?
Got a website out, FedEd, FEDED.us. It's about basic monetary system education. Our motto is, we are the gold standard, yes, pun intended. We are the gold standard of monetary system education, FedEd.us.
All right, I'll put that on the screen. And same thing for you, Mr. George Gammon. First time around, they don't know who George Gammon is. Tell them where they can find you at.
They can find me on Twitter, or they can find me on my YouTube channel. Most people watch those economic videos that I do, and it's just my name. First name George, typical spelling, last name Gammon.
All right, well, sounds good. Well, gentlemen, once again, it's been great.
My name is George.
George talking right now.
Turn on my intro video quickly.
All right, so yeah, it's been great hanging out as always. Thanks for the insights and just the back and forth. I always learn a lot hanging out with you guys. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. And let's pray for a much better week ahead, because I'm sure we're gonna have a lot to talk about next weekend if we can get together. So enjoy your weekend, gentlemen. If you enjoyed this, don't be afraid to give it a thumbs up, share this information, and check out all these guys on YouTube and everywhere else they're at. So other than that, be blessed, be safe, enjoy your week.
Everybody be safe and well.